Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this by either work, or worship, or psychic control, or philosophy, by one or more, or all of these, and be free. These are the words of Swami Vivekananda from his amazing book, Raja Yoga. Now, the freedom that Swami Vivekananda is referring to here is very different and much greater than the freedoms that most people pursue. The freedom to do what we want, go where you want, eat what you want, etc. True, lasting freedom from war, disease, hate, fear, and negative thinking can only come from manifesting more of our divine nature. Despite appearances to the contrary, all of life is geared towards helping us manifest this divine nature. The Nine Freedoms is a brilliant guidebook for spiritual truth seekers, which we highly recommend as it details 9 essential steps which we will all take, maybe in this life and or future lives, on the spiritual journey towards greater freedom. The 5th freedom in this book is called cosmic consciousness. This is considered the highest state of consciousness, the highest stage of Samadhi that we can attain on earth. And it is this stage that we are here to explore today. Now, we decided to put on this event to help people develop a better understanding of what Samadhi, cosmic consciousness is, to help you discern the truth from the various accounts that have been produced over the years, and help you prepare for the time, either in this life or a future one, when you will experience Samadhi, cosmic consciousness. Gaining cosmic consciousness has transformed the lives of people like Arjuna, as described in the sacred text, the Bhagavad Gita, Paramahansa Yogananda, as described in the fantastic book, Autobiography of a Yogi, Master of Yoga Dr. George King, as described in the 9 Freedoms and other literature. However, these people that I've just named have actually passed on from this physical realm, and we can't ask them questions about their experiences, the responses to which would help deepen our understanding and appreciation of this highly exalted state. Cosmic consciousness has transformed the life of our very special guest here, Richard Lawrence. Thank you for joining us, Richard.
Thank you, Ayub.
As you can see, he has not passed on. He's still very much with us.
Just see how this interview goes.
And the great thing is that we can ask him questions about his experiences, and we will do so during the course of this conversation. He has a tremendous wealth of knowledge and insights to share about Samadhi. Now, it's important to highlight here that this video is about a new, more advanced Samadhic experience that Richard had in 2023, which he calls an entry-level experience of cosmic consciousness. We produced a different video last year of an earlier Samadhic experience that Richard had, which had a very positive response. And as a result of that, we wanted to go a little bit deeper into exploring this fascinating topic with this particular video. If you want to watch that video, you will find the link to it in the video description. Now, I want to make it clear that you do not need to have watched the previous video to enjoy this video. So a little bit about Richard. He is an international best-selling author and world-renowned spiritual teacher. Richard co-authored with Master of Yoga Dr. George King the spiritual workbook, Realize Your Inner Potential. Richard attributes his spiritual progress and his attainment of cosmic consciousness to the life-changing wisdom and practices in this wonderful book. Highly recommend you get it. Richard has been practicing the spiritual path of King Yoga, named after Master of Yoga Dr. George King, for more than 50 years, Richard? Yeah. No one received more unique higher initiations and senior responsibilities direct from Master of Yoga Dr. George King. He has received over 20 years of direct training and discipline from Dr. King before he passed from this realm in 1997. Richard still continues to live, breathe, and promote King Yoga to this very day. Having worked with Richard for more than 20 years, in my humble opinion, I believe Richard is the most advanced disciple of the spiritual master, Dr. George King. It's important to highlight that Richard's experience of cosmic consciousness is not official Ethereal Society teachings. But in my opinion, it does provide a very definite validation for the teachings. In this video, we are going to share what Samadhi is, why should people be interested in gaining Samadhi, discuss some of the misconceptions that people have about Samadhi. What is Samadhi? It is a state where one is lifted above the ordinary plane of consciousness through many different stages to the highest state known as cosmic consciousness. Swami Shivananda stated, and I quote, "Cosmic consciousness is an inherent, natural faculty of all men and women. Training and discipline are necessary to awaken this consciousness. It is inactive in the majority of human beings on account of the force of ignorance." In the Nine Freedoms book, cosmic consciousness is described as follows. There comes a stage when at once the consciousness of the individual soars to mighty heights, unlimited, unbounded by mind, high into the realms of intuition, of divine inspiration it goeth, through space where time stands quite still, non-existent, immobile. Cosmic consciousness, like the flower of God, breaks from a bud into full, lasting bloom. No longer does such a one regard itself as this sex or the other, for it is above such limitation. No longer does such a one take foolish pride in being born this race or the other, for it knoweth that it is a part of all the races. From the very depths it came unto this stage, and now it begins a great and mighty journey through cosmic truth. This is the real beginning of freedom, for free will is recognized for what it is, binding, breaking, individual. It is transmuted into that which is collective, all-embracing, knowing, changing, but this change above time, this change into cosmic wisdom. So your thoughts on that, Richard?
Excuse me. Thank you for those words, but I have to be, again, I'm sorry to be disappointing here. So, but let me just, if I may, just say a couple of things about that. I'm glad you mentioned, this is my take on it, this is not Ethereal Society teaching, and people who are in the Ethereal Society are absolutely at liberty to accept it, to not know whether it's even true. That's fine by me. It doesn't matter at all to me. There may be some who even don't believe it. I think that would be strange because they don't know. But I also think I believe there are some who will intuitively recognize it. But that's up to the individual. That's absolutely fine. But I must make it very clear, and I did, as you rightly said, say it's entry-level cosmic consciousness. And I've only experienced it once, and I've only had the Samadhi experience once, and they were both last year. And that one I described as dipping my toe in the ocean of Samadhi. So I'm way below the level of a master like Dr. George King. I have to say that. And the level he attained is lives ahead of me. And likewise Swami Sivananda, likewise Swami Vivekananda, who you also met. Those, I wouldn't put myself into their category at all. There are, as you did touch on it, different degrees, and we might go into how that happens.
Sure.
There's a difference, for those who know the Nine Freedoms, for example, between the state that's described in the Fifth Freedom, cosmic consciousness, and the same state described in the Sixth Freedom, which shows that they, in my perception, that one can be far more fulsome, evolved, advanced than the other. And so mine is very much entry level. I just want to stress that point. You mentioned Arjuna, who was a disciple, of course, of Sri Krishna.
Correct.
And you mentioned Yogananda, who was a disciple of the Lord Babaji, actually, but it was his teacher in that life was Sri Yukteswar. Mm-hmm. And in those two cases, the state was brought about by their masters. And whereas in my particular case, I did induce it, but then I was very lucky, extremely fortunate, to have had available to me the teachings, the advice, and the conversations that I'd had with Dr. King when he was with us, physically with us.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Right. As you mentioned Arjuna, I'd like to share a few words from Swami Shivananda about Arjuna's experience of cosmic consciousness. Arjuna's doubts having been removed through a clear description of the nature of the Atman and the origin and destruction of all created things, he is now ready to behold the cosmic vision. Krishna grants him the divine sight by means of which Arjuna beholds the Lord as a vast cosmic manifestation. The vision is at once all-comprehensive and simultaneous. In every direction, Arjuna sees the Lord as the entire universe. All the created worlds, gods, beings, creatures, and things stand revealed as the one gigantic body of the Lord. Arjuna further sees that the great cosmic drama is set in motion and controlled by the almighty power of the Lord. His will alone prevails in all things and actions, both good and bad. That's just a short summary there by Swami Shivananda of the amazing experience that Arjuna had. So I highly recommend you check out the fuller description in the Bhagavad Gita. Why should people be interested in gaining Samadhi, Richard?
Well, I want to also go back to something you said at the beginning. You quoted Swami Vivekananda, and you quoted from this book. And this actual book is a book that I got when I was at Hull University in the very early 1970s. Don't want to give away my age. I don't mind giving away my age. It doesn't matter. And I got this book, and I read it, and I thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to do in this life, and I'm going to go for Samadhi, and I intended to do it. And the next day, I met John Holder, a fellow director of the Aetherius Society to this day, and who was doing a PhD, and he told me about the Aetherius Society. And I realized that this was more important than me pursuing Samadhi. That's the first point. I was delighted, thrilled to hear about the Aetherius Society, slightly disappointed though, because I realized then that service is more important, and that's what I want to come to. So there has been a big change, and even if you look at, in there are the aphorisms of Patanjali, who in a sense was the master, and I was very lucky to have a conversation with Dr. King about this. He came to earth to deliver his aphorisms, which is, they're known as the 8 limbs of yoga, and they are the steps of Raja Yoga. They're followed by everybody, as far as I know. All Sivananda, Vivekananda, all Yogananda, all the great teachers follow those 8 limbs given by Patanjali. But the big change is that, as you read there, you could choose a particular path, be it devotion, be it work, be it be it philosophy, be it psychic control. Now, you don't choose. Now, you do what the world needs the most. And this happened to me on day 2. I read this on day 1, and day 2, I saw something which was much bigger for others. And the first thing I'd say is that's not the most important thing anybody could strive for. The most important thing anybody could strive for is to give maximum service to others. And if that slows down your advancement, if it does, then that's perfectly valid. But what I believe myself is that if it does slow down your path to whatever step you're going to get to, we're all different, it will be a quicker journey to ascension, as you were. It'd be to liberation, as they used to call it, if you follow the path of service. So now, the choice is more theoretical. In fact, I'd go further. I would say that if someone said, well, actually, I want to follow the path of philosophy instead of the path of work, it wouldn't work for them. So that's a massive change. And if you look at the aphorisms of Patanjali, he spells out right at the beginning of them what are known as the yamas and the niyamas. There's 5 yamas, 5 niyamas. And they are, if you like, the ethical code. So there's 10 things that he spells out you'll need to do. It's interesting because in the West there's the 10 commandments underlying the Western major religions, and in the East you have these 10 yamas and niyamas, but not one of them, in either case actually, is world service. And that should be the number one 100%. On both lists. Sorry if I'm offending anybody. So that's changed absolutely everything. But what I've also discovered, and it took me a long time, and I've made many personal mistakes, I want to stress that point, very much so. I'm certainly no saint, I'm no adept, I'm not a master, even though I have had this entry-level cosmic consciousness experience. And I can explain how I know that I'm not a master, and how I also know that some people who are regarded as masters aren't in the real sense masters, if you want to go there. But what I'm absolutely clear of, in the end though, to get to Samadhi, you'd still need to follow those yamas and niyamas. It's just that they are not the priority. And I can give another example. Patanjali tells you to be indifferent when confronted by evil. And that's an old teaching, and it applied for thousands of years. And it's very good for you, the individual, if you want to get to enlightenment, because you learn detachment, and it just washes over you, and you stay focused on your own development. But in these days, it's not right. In these days, we have to fight the evil. Not fight it with weapons, fight it with truth, fight it with love, fight it with spiritual energy. So there are these significant changes which completely revolutionize. Even a master who lived so recently as Vivekananda, actually he's an ascended master now, but his life was, what, just over 100 years ago? You know, and it's already changed.
So, doesn't quite answer my question, which I asked you, Richard.
That's a terrible habit. That's a politician's habit, isn't it? Just remind me of the question.
So why should people be interested in Samadhi?
Why should they be interested?
Yes.
Well, I think it's, you know, it's good to know where we're headed for. And I think that's why, as
100%.
you rightly said, the 9 freedoms is so wonderful. It tells us the stepping stones all the way through to solar existence, life on the sun. So it's a very inspiring thing. But I also believe, now, having done a thing called the Spiritual Freedom Show especially, that those very advanced places we're going to, Saturnian existence, interplanetary existence, are relevant to us now. They're not just a pointer ahead what's coming.
Sure.
That we can apply the principles of them now. And so if you to give you one example of why it would be good to be focused on our goal, and I'm going to repeat this, is world service. Even if it means you're delaying your own Samadhi. That's the priority. If you are, though, you've got to take the opportunities when they come. And I've seen people not do that. They say, well, I'm giving up my own advancement to serve.
Sure.
And then when the chance does come, I think a lot of us have made that mistake at different times. They don't take the chance then, which will come. And I would say it will come more powerfully, because you've manipulated karma so that when it comes, it could be far more powerful than it actually would have been. But if you are aware of what Samadhi is, and I'm going to come on to the whole question of Samadhi with seed, which is relevant to this, or what
Sure.
they would have called, I think it's a similar principle, the samskaras in the old writings. You know that you can start burning those up well before you get to Samadhi. Those seeds, those obstructions, if you like, those mental patterns, so that when you do enter Samadhi, you will enter it in a much more advanced state. And that's why I'm stressing mine is entry level. It's very much what they would have called Samadhi with seed, whereas Dr. George King entered a seedless state. And you can see that from the way he does. Nobody that I know of, including any of the yogas you name, has described more brilliantly from a technical point of view what that state is.
100%.
And from the way he experienced it, and the perfection of the way he experienced it, in other words, raising all the energy up through all the chakras. I mean, I've got far, far more appreciation and respect for that than I did have, because I didn't do that. And I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't advanced enough to do that. But if you can raise all the energies up as he did every time, then you gain the full seedless state. And it's a far more, obviously, I actually think that if someone entered cosmic consciousness the way, the technical way Dr. King describes it in that book, The 9 Freedoms, they would be ready to ascend. That's my opinion. But anyway, the service that you're giving and coming back to service, is all, even if, and it is an if, you get to Samadhi later, you're burning up those seeds, those samskaras, for example, through prayer. Every time you pray the way we are taught to pray in the Ethereal Society, you are raising the energies within you. That's not your main motive. Your motive is to send energy out to others. But you must transmute the energies within you. That means that you're burning up some of those samskaras, those seeds, those thought patterns, those discolorations. As it were, the chakras, the lower ones, are becoming less warm than they would have been, to use that brilliant terminology of Mars Sector 6 in the 9 Freedoms. And so when it comes, it's a higher state. I mean, I even think, when Dr. King described his first raising of Kundalini, he experienced tremendous pain. And he describes that, and he said he burnt up karma. Now, Dr. King was an avatar, as was Swami Sivananda, actually. And he came here without terrestrial samskaras. He took upon himself karma, but he didn't have all those thought patterns, those limited thinking patterns, the things you mentioned. You were talking about freedom, and also you were really touching on free will, which is like the opposite, actually. It doesn't appear to be, He was free of that as a soul, if you like. So that he burnt up the karma, whatever karma he'd taken on, and taken on in his youth, and prior to that in that life, because he'd never been on earth before in an incarnated body, ever. And so the passage then was completely free, and he went all the way through. Now, I've experienced a little bit of pain, yes, but nothing like that, not that excruciating pain. And I think, one of the reasons was that I didn't raise it in its entirety. And I think another of the reasons was that I'd been burning up through service. He entered it in the old way. He didn't enter it through service. He entered it using the old yogas.
It's a tougher way, a more challenging, difficult way than service.
Not necessarily, no. Service can be very tough and extremely challenging. But he came here to get there quickly because he had a mission to perform. And he knew what to do. He didn't necessarily know what his mission would be, but he knew what he had to do. And the path of service, as we now know, it hadn't been given then. And so he did it very quickly. Yes, you're right, people do say that. They say it's much harder than karma yoga, they say. And it is harder than the old ideas of karma yoga, the sort of ideas you'll find in the Bhagavad Gita. But now we may touch upon that in an organization like the Ethereal Society. The pressures, the demands, the hours that people have worked and do still work are extremely demanding and longer. And although there's a certain austerity, as one of the niyamas, I think, it's either a yama or a niyama, I think it's a niyama, would have been sort of gained by denial and fasting and so on. Long hours of hard work is a very demanding thing. So I think it's still got to be tough. But there again, we're also told, on this path, if you're giving service, fully giving service, in a fully dedicated way, through the Ethereal Society, as it now is, it's a quick path. Quickly, not easily, said the Master Ethereus, will you don the crowns of adeptship. But that's if you really go for it and you really make it a success and you take your opportunities. I would throw that in too. So that's a big change, because karma yoga was always, and you're not wrong, because many would say it's an easier path, it's for the less advanced. They looked almost down their nose, some people, at karma yoga. It's actually the greatest form of yoga there is. At its highest level, if you're doing it in a very potent and intense manner.
Thank you for that. What are the common misconceptions of gaining a state of samadhi like cosmic consciousness? Now, I'm going to list out a few misconceptions that people may have, and I'm going to invite Richard to briefly comment on them. Samadhi is a state of passive bliss, that it is a passive state of relaxation or pleasure. What would you have to say about that briefly, Richard?
I think the word passive is very interesting, by the way. because bliss isn't really passive, as most people think of bliss. So that's one of those paradoxes which one would have to think about. But ultimately, it's a state of knowing, is what I'd say to that. It's something more than bliss. And a lot of people get stuck. That's what I'm talking about. Even really great, advanced yogis and advanced mystics have got stuck at the bliss stage. And although bliss is absolutely one of the characteristics of it, it's not the goal. And you need to move on from that. And the goal is enlightenment. And it is kind of, the word passive, I think, was the best thing about that quote, by the way. And you'll find that word in the Fifth Freedom, passive, actually.
Good point, yeah.
About the light. I can't remember in front of me, it's all feeling and yet passive. I think, and there are many paradoxes in the Nine Freedoms.
There are, yeah.
It's not mind, but it's all knowing. So you do get that, but the goal isn't to enjoy bliss, and that's where I think some even advanced yogas have gone wrong and got stuck. And that's why I say, if you're on the path of service, I think myself, and this is my opinion, if it's the right service, it's not just any old service, it's the service that you can do which will do the most good for all, and you're doing it as far, within reason, with the utmost of your ability, you will get to ascension faster because you'll be driven. You won't want to stay wrapped up in bliss because you will regard that as selfish. It's a kind of spiritual selfishness in a strange way. But there are people, I believe, not just in India either. I think some of the Zen Buddhists in China and other parts of the world have got stuck on they think, I've arrived now. This is absolutely wonderful. I think Dr. King said when you raise the Kundalini to the heart center, you can experience imperturbable bliss. But he said, then you should go on, though, because your goal is enlightenment. Your goal is to know. The goal is to know God. Choose well, stand fast, know God. And that is, it's a kind that you could call it a passive bliss. It's the most satisfying thing there is. It's above bliss as we know bliss, even a great bliss. It's above peace as we know peace. I think the Master Jesus said it after the 9th blessing in the 12 blessings, and I haven't got the full quote in front of me, but you'll discover peace and you'll discover something even beyond that. And there is something beyond that. And I would say that is when you know. Because suddenly, it's no longer belief, it's no longer faith, it's no longer, all the worries, all the doubts at that moment, everything has gone because it's such a relief. You can't describe this. We're limited by language.
We are, yeah.
And I can't describe it, at all, and nor could anyone else. But you just try your best. But I would say the most interesting word in that quote, though, is the word passive. But other than that, the goal isn't bliss. The goal is to know God.
Thank you for that. Samadhi is escapism. Some may view samadhi as a means to escape from the challenges and responsibilities of everyday life. What would you say about that?
Where are you picking up these doubting comments? They're over the internet, are they?
They are, yeah.
Well, no, samadhi... No, that would be that person doesn't know what samadhi is, whoever wrote that at all. You could say that, basic meditation practice could be an escape from life, yes. Very basic meditation. Let's really sort of be really honest here. And I'm going to quote somebody else who's better than these people. This is the great Michelangelo. And he said this: the greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. The greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. And there you have, I think, in that one sentence, a lot of the New Age movement, a lot of the mind-body-spirit movement, and even some of the great yogis who are regarded as masters. They're earth masters and adepts, but not in that they're not really, because their power is still warm in those places, as Mars Sector 6 would put it. And they haven't got to that final destination. I don't think Yogananda, who I love and I greatly respect and admire, and who's an outstanding promoter of spirituality, one of the greatest we've ever seen. And I certainly relate to him very, very closely, I have to say. But I don't think he, in the strict sense as is defined in the Nine Freedoms, was a master. I know that may offend some people, or an adept. But there again, you know, there are very, very few genuine masters and adepts who are not ascended on our physical world, on this physical realm. I don't even know if there are any. As I mentioned, Dr. King, he was clean, if that's the right word. He had a persona, if you knew him, where he could have a gruff exterior, he could have a comical exterior, he was a down-to-earth, practical man, but he was as pure as the driven snow. He could even be brusque, and he himself said he could be impatient, but he was completely pure. So he didn't have all these lower blockages that those of us who've been through many lives here do have. So I think that's part of Michelangelo. But it's worse than that. You've got people who aren't anywhere near the Yogananda level, who are regarded. They've sold millions of books. I don't really want to name them, but I'm only doing this because I think it might be helpful to some people. I mean, I can think of one who's sold millions of books, who's regarded as the great New Age guru of our times, has a massive following, and yet I've seen him on television saying that the highest form of love is sex. I'm not, you know, when I say, my comment here isn't in any way bigoted. I haven't been celibate all my life, as some yogis have been, as Dr. King definitely was, in my view. I think he was a virgin. I think he was a pure, and I'm sure Swami Sivananda was too. But to say that sex is the highest form of love just shows me one thing, that he doesn't know what love energy is in the higher chakras. So this person can't be enlightened, and he's regarded as enlightened. There's another one who says that you can enter the now just by not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past, and living in the moment. Now, that might be very beneficial. Both these people, I think, have helped a lot of people, and that's great, and they still are helping people, no doubt. But that isn't the now. That is just detaching from your memories, not even the past, your memories of the past, at a conscious mind level, and your hopes and expectations of the future, again at a conscious mind level, and then getting some peace from it, which some people think is enlightenment. That's what I mean about your aim is too low, and you reach it. And then they think I'm there, and they think he's there, this person. I met him once, and I'm not saying, as I say, I'm sure he's doing good things, but he's not he doesn't even know that it doesn't really start till you go to the superconscious level. And I'm just throwing this out for people's discrimination. I know of another teacher, a woman in this case, again, sold millions of books, highly regarded, who has actually said, and she said some very good things, indeed, and helped people. Again, I'm sure she's helped people. Many will say she's helped them. But she's made the statement that prayer, no matter how much prayer you did, it wouldn't be enough to assuage the situation in the world. See, now that, I'm not judging, I'm just saying she doesn't know the power of prayer and what it can do, or she wouldn't say that. And I think she's turned to politics instead. And, you know, I'm not saying you can't do any good through politics, but a truly enlightened person wouldn't say that, and probably wouldn't go into politics. It can't be dogmatic. There might be some reason for it. Gandhi, in a way, did. And, you know, and people who abolished the slave trade did. And, you know, there might be a case for it. But those kind of statements, one has to describe. Actually, I know of an even bigger figure than any of those, who's from an old tradition, who's a highly revered person, and describes himself as just an ordinary monk, and that's may be true, actually, very humble about it, and has actually said the highest form of meditation is sleep. So again, I know why he might say that, because he's talking about probably the mind waves of slowing down to delta from alpha from beta, but that's not meditation.
It's not
in the way that Dr. King defines meditation. And one could go on, then some of them are worse. They'll tell you can get anything you want, massive movements, and A, you can't, and B, if you did, it wouldn't really be a very good thing. If you've got everything you want, and so on. So I won't go any further, but I do want to stress that I can't remember what the question was we started from, but there are people diluting it, and that, I think it would be absolutely fine if they got to a certain level and they said, this is very helpful, and I want to teach, say, for example, mindfulness, because it will help people to cope with their lives, or and it does probably, but not to say this is it. This is samadhi, this is enlightenment, or whatever term, I've reached the final stage, or however they put it, because they haven't. Yeah.
That brings me on to the next point, which sometimes samadhi is portrayed as being easily achievable.
No, it's not easily achievable. It's not, I think, the result of one life, probably, Although, I will say this, that the idea of Patanjali was to enable anyone to do it in one life. And if they, I say the idea of Patanjali, it is said about his system that if somebody followed it rigorously enough, in the old tradition, they would. As I say, it's all changed now because of service. They probably wouldn't now if they did that, by the way. Not full samadhi. They might get to a certain level, as I said before, but get stuck there. Dr. King, when he talks about meditation and when he talks about samadhi, it's the highest definition and explanation of it I've ever heard anywhere. And he goes to the highest level. And I think that's because of who he was. He went straight there. He spent 10 years doing the yoga, and he went all the way there with no limit at all. But it's certainly, I don't know, if the implication here is it's easy or it could be done, no. It's a very difficult thing to attain, and it's best attained, it can really, I think, I could be more dogmatic, it can only be attained through service. If you're looking at me as an example of someone, as I would see it at the low end of these states, and again, I'm not asking anyone to take my word for that, because I don't mind at all whether they do or don't. But I attribute it nearly all to service, not entirely, because you do need certain practices just to get there. I don't know of anybody else who has entered samadhi through service. I'm not saying there isn't anybody, but I don't know of anybody who's even claimed that. But I have at a certain level, and it's very. But you do need lots of people giving great service out there of different kinds. Some of them sacrificing, risking their lives in war-torn areas and so on. But you would still need to do certain practices and techniques if you want to enter samadhi. And some of them either don't know those techniques, or they don't believe in those techniques, and they certainly don't practice them. So no matter what service they give, they aren't going to get to samadhi, and that may not bother them. You don't have to. Giving service is wonderful, but if you do, I think you'll have I know that you will have a much greater grasp of how you can serve to the greatest effect.
Yeah, Swami Shivananda was talking in one of his books about how when certain aspirants start hearing sounds of the heart chakra or start seeing lights, and they may mistake that for being samadhi.
Oh, I see.
And he was saying, no, this is not samadhi. This is just a lower psychic phenomena that occur.
Thanks for mentioning that, because one of the beauties of the Aetherius Society teaching, of the 9 freedoms in particular, and of Dr. King's teaching, is it does stress the psychic stage. And you can write off all sorts of teachers who don't know about the psychic stage, who don't even claim to have gone there themselves, never mind teaching it, and you can know that they are not enlightened, that they haven't entered Samadhi. Because you have to go through the psychic stage. You know, it's interesting, a lot of people have missed this, but in the, not the fifth freedom that you've been talking about, but in the fourth freedom, and I'm going to check my facts here,
Sure.
the stage called concentration is a psychic stage. It's a psychic stage. That's surprising to a lot of people. Concentration is a psychic stage? Why is that? Here we go. Psychic man, and when Master says man, it's in the old days when man meant people.
Yep.
Men, women, all people of earth. Psychic man can so control the subtle universal life forces that he can bring about strict mental control. By so doing, he's capable of concentration. In other words, he's saying you can't even concentrate until you bring control of the universal life forces, which is a psychic practice. Now, somebody might say, well, hang on, there's some incredible professors and academics and scientists and people who have great powers of concentration who aren't controlling the universal life forces. And from that, I'd say, yes, they have mental abilities, which they're applying, but concentration as it should be. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that Patanjali calls Samadhi a level of concentration. I mean, it's a through line from concentration through what is called contemplation in the nine freedoms, which used to be the meditation stage, dharana, through to Samadhi. Concentration will lead you to the truth. Now, the way you can know that these various professors, scientists, academics, and so on, with very good brains, very good knowledge, wide variety of knowledge, are not practicing concentration in that way, you can prove it because they all come to different conclusions. And they argue with each other endlessly. You know, they might be an economist. No two economists agree with each other, as far as I can tell. But concentration will lead you to the truth. You'll get to the same place. And that's one of the beauties of Samadhi, by the way. I say it's knowing God, but you could say it's knowing yourself, your real self. Or you could say it's knowing all. But it's everyone who gets there has the same experiences when they get there. I mean, they don't describe them in the same way.
Of course.
There are variants in how they experience it, but they all experience this oneness in whatever words they use. They discover what Master Jesus calls the I am within man. And when I had my experience, it was all an I am experience. And somebody else might say oneness. The reason I say I am, whatever I was meditating upon, I am, is because in my mind, and this is not a mind state, by the way, it's beyond mind, but in my mind, there's a paradox in there somewhere. If you say I am one with this microphone, there's me and the microphone coming together as one. But if you say, I am this microphone, there's no division at all. And it's that state of oneness, but it can only be when you are your real self. I am divine spirit. It's one of the greatest, most simple affirmations. It's the best news anybody
really
could
is.
ever have.
It really is,
Yeah.
Very hopeful. Now, to gain a state of Samadhi, one needs to have the right level of purification and attunement to living a spiritual life. And this was summed up quite beautifully in an early story of Yogananda's contact with a spiritual adept or master from his book Autobiography of a Yogi, where he reported, "Sir, why don't you grant me a Samadhi? Dear one, I would be glad to convey the divine contact, but it is not my place to do so." The saint looked at me with half-closed eyes. "Your master will bestow that experience on you shortly. Your body is not tuned just yet. As a small lamp bulb would be shattered by excessive voltage, so your nerves are unready for the cosmic current. If I gave you the infinite ecstasy right now, you would burn as though every cell were on fire." good
That's a great
analysis
little,
of
that's a good story. He reminds me of something that happened to me, which I will share. That
Sure.
I was with. I haven't let you come to your question. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was going to ask you for your input
Okay,
on that,
yeah.
your thoughts
So
on that.
I was actually in Lake Powell area with Dr. King in 1986. And I spent a lot of time with him. I was very fortunate. I had also had a number of spiritual conversations with him, which some people have told me they never had. Even people who are very close to him, really. So I was lucky and fortunate in that way. And what I tried not to do was take advantage of his presence. And so did everybody else, by the way. You know, we're not there to sort of ask our questions and try and get information from him or what have you. We're there more, we should be there more for his benefit than ours, and talking about what he wants to talk about, which he knows far more about than we do. So let's go with you. You know?
Sure.
But on this occasion, I had it in my mind, and I was very friendly with the late Alan Mosley, who had the same thing in his mind, that I could become an adept in one life, a yoga adept. Now, I didn't want to delude myself and think I can do this when I can't. So I thought, I'm going to ask. And it was a good opportunity. I mean, what he wanted me to do, just out of interest, is play him my theme tune.
Right.
Because it was the days of cassette recorders, and he had a theme tune, which was You Only Live Twice. And there's a real reason for that, to do with an event he had in a place called Carned Llewellyn. So his theme tune was the James Bond theme tune for You Only Live Twice. And he said, you've got to bring your theme tune. Well, so the only thing I could find was a tune which was in a film, and I think it was a film David Bowie was in, actually. And it was called Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. And it's quite a nice tune. It's like an oriental kind of tune. So I sort of managed to get that together. I knew it was going to, and I brought it over. We were having a drink and sitting down, and I played him my tune. He played me his tune. I played it on this cassette machine. And he said, I think mine's better than yours, boy. But I took that chance, and I said, that's just an aside, that's a background. Sure. But I said to him, Master, could I ask you, would it be possible for me to become an adept in this life? And he said to me, I'm sorry, boy, but you can't join the 6 adepts. And the 6 adepts, for those who aren't familiar, are a wonderful, highly advanced, cosmic group of intelligences who are saving us from the darkest forces around our world and even beyond it, and have fought our greatest battles. And the very fact that he even entertained that I might even be asking that, I took as his faith in people was quite phenomenal. Quite phenomenal. He really believed in people. He said to me one day when I'd lost a lot of confidence and I thought I wasn't doing very well, he said to me, there's nothing I've done that you couldn't do. And I didn't believe him when he said that. We were walking down by Putney Towpath in London.
Neither would I.
No, exactly. And I thought, it's a wonderful thing to say, isn't it? But I wasn't rude, but I was trying to react. And then he said to me, and I really mean that. And that, I think, is a credit to him. I mean, he really believed in the potential of all people, 100%. But anyway, he said, no, you can't really join the 6 adepts. So I said, no, I'm not, sorry. I'm not asking to join the 6 adepts. I know I'm not ready to do that. Long lives away from that. What I'm asking you is whether I could become, and I think I put it less, an ordinary terrestrial adept in this life. And he said, oh yes, you could. Very quickly. But there's 2 things you're going to have to do. And he told me the 2 things, which I won't go into at this moment. Right. But I didn't do them for some while, by the way. And you mentioned being pure and so on. And I want to stress again, I've made many mistakes. And I've behaved in a way at times I shouldn't have behaved. So I don't come in as the pure sort of saintly figure at all. I'm far from that. But that did spur me on, though, in the last couple of years, because I thought, well, I think I should have done it sooner, And I think when I'd said an ordinary terrestrial adept, and he answered me, and by then he had softened, I think, because possibly through disappointment, some of his views of meditation, he would even say, go and meditate in the temple. He didn't mean enter Samadhi to people. I think he was thinking there of what people on earth regard as an adept, as opposed to that definition I gave in the 9 freedoms.
Right.
I think I took it like that. But it did spur me on. And I thought, well, I haven't lived up to that. And I haven't lived up to the initiations I've been given. And, I've got to do this. And I thought, well, I can do this. So it turned out to be very, very helpful to me. But I also completely understand that statement in there about, that saint wasn't his master, Yogananda's master. So it wasn't for him to do it anyway.
Exactly.
But also Yogananda wasn't ready. But, Dr. King did say about Yogananda that when he came in, he was, I think he said something like emotional and unstable, or some phrase like that, as a child, and he said he could have been kicked out by his master, really, because he was highly, of that book, Dr. King said to me, in some ways I love that book, the autobiography of Yogi. In some ways it's too sentimental for me. He was a tough, Dr. King was a no-nonsense, tough, disciplined yogi, and a very, very great one. But he also said his master must have seen his potential, and so stayed with him and helped him. He could see what he could become. I can actually relate to that as well. And I can relate to this idea that he wasn't ready for it. I remember when working on Realize Your Inner Potential with Dr. King, I thought to myself at the time, which was in the 1990s, it was the last book he wrote, he was very keen on it indeed. He wasn't very in good health. He went through every single practice in it, one by one, even added some more mantras in it, approved the whole thing. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm not really ready to write a book called Realize Your Inner Potential. I'm not there yet. I was kind of aware of it, but at the same time, as a pragmatic thing, it had to be written then, because he was there.
Sure.
And he needed to approve it. And so it's different from this story, but it's a similar thing. And I feel, I'm not saying I live up to it fully, but I'm now very comfortable with being, I'm not even going to say a co-author because it's his book, but the person who helped him to write that book.